I don't think it's necessarily a very controversial statement to make when I say that the American education system is failing at least some of its students. And I think that as a substitute teacher, I sort of get to see a lot of this happening firsthand. One thing I think of, one experience that was really eye-opening for me was just recently I was in a classroom going about my day. I'd have kids coming into the classroom when periods change. I'd teach them. I'd have some kids that were on task, some kids that were off task. Pretty normal day. That day, it was a good day, but pretty normal as far as days at work go. But then by the final period, a girl in the back of the class raises her hand, and she obviously needs help. So I just start talking to her, start telling her what to do, and she just looks at me. She was like, I don't speak any English. Luckily, I knew she spoke Spanish. I was able to help her from that point. I taught her the whole lesson. I spent much of my class really just focusing in on helping her. To be quite honest, it sort of took away from my ability to teach the rest of the class because there was just one student who, obviously needed just a little bit more help than everyone else, because everyone else I could just give them, the instructions, and, they'd do it, and have to make sure they're on task, but they'd be able to do it by themselves. But in this case, none of the resources were in her native language of Spanish. None of the videos or the textbook or the instruction, the quizzes, none of that stuff was in Spanish. So she was sitting in science class, sort of just staring at her computer screen like, what am I even supposed to do in this case? And luckily, I speak enough Spanish to where I was able to teach her the lesson. There were some difficulties just because when you're trying to explain kinetic and potential energy to someone in a language that is not your first, it can be a bit difficult, but more or less I was able to get the point across and make sure that she had the important information that she would need for the notes in order to pass the quiz and that sort of thing. But it got me thinking, what if I wasn't there? What if there was another substitute that day who just didn't speak Spanish, wasn't able to communicate with her? Does her teacher speak Spanish? If not, are there resources for her to actually understand the lesson? Because when I was in there, there wasn't. If I didn't speak Spanish that day, then there was no way she was getting any of that information. And isn't that sort of just a bad situation to be in when you're at school, for 7 hours a day, and you're not really able to actually retain any of the information because it's not in a language that you understand? I mean, imagine going to a country that is not your own, being in 6th grade, in a 6th grade science course, as like a 10, 11-year-old, and just not being able to understand what they're saying, not just because you don't understand the concepts, but because you don't understand the language that they are trying to teach you in. And so this student that I was working with is not alone by any means. There are 5 million students in the United States who are what they call English language learners, people who do not speak English natively, but they are trying to learn English while also being in school. So people who are in the process of learning English while enrolled in American schools. There's 5 million students in that exact same position, 3.8 million of which are native Spanish speakers who are trying to learn English. They are in the same situation as that girl. And you might imagine that that is a pretty tough situation to be in, when you are being taught, but you just don't even understand the language that they are using to teach you. And it shines through. The national average for graduation in this country is 84%. Amongst English language learners, that phrase that I used earlier, it is 67%. 67% of English language learners graduate from high school versus 84% of Americans in general. Both of those numbers, in my opinion, are kind of bad and reflect bigger issues in the education system. But 67% especially is just incredibly low. And it's no wonder that there is such an achievement gap between people who do and don't understand the language. If you can't even get your high school diploma, then how are you supposed to, get into a good paying job, get into a college, that sort of thing. So there's a huge problem with the education gap and the opportunity and the achievement gap between people who speak English natively and people who don't speak English natively. So clearly, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. You can't have 5 million students who are, going to have a more difficult time completing their education, and that's not to say that there aren't inherent difficulties, that's not to say that we can fix everything about this issue. Obviously, there are going to be inherent difficulties being someone who's learning English while also being in school, but you can make it easier for them by having resources available in their native language so that they can at least actually learn. Now, this is a nationwide problem that exists anywhere that there are non-native English speakers. But what's surprising is that my area has a huge influx, especially after Hurricane Maria. Lots of Puerto Ricans, lots of Dominicans, lots of people from the Caribbean, as well as some Central Americans, South Americans, come into my area. There's a huge community of people in the Latin American diaspora here, and yet even still, in one of the middle schools that we have here, we ended up in this situation where there were simply no resources, and that student's success that day was dependent on the fact that I could speak enough Spanish to teach her the lesson, and a little bit on Google Translate as well. But could you imagine the difficulty that a student in a less, I guess you could say, diverse area, for instance, a place like Mississippi or South Carolina, could you imagine what that student would be going through in an area like that where there's not as big of a community? Maybe they have even less access to resources, or there's less of a chance that the substitute would be bilingual. And this is only going to become more of a problem as we have more of an influx of immigrants from Central America and people coming from the Caribbean, and just generally as the Latin American Hispanic population in American schools continues to rise, as trends are showing that it is going to. So the way to do that, the way to address sort of this problem is through bilingual education. By teaching kids in their native language, in a language that they actually understand, it will give them not only a better understanding of the course material that they are trying to learn, but also give them more confidence when dealing with the subjects that they are supposed to be learning about. If you're learning in another language that you don't speak that well, it can be very demoralizing. You just don't feel like you really understand it because you can't quite express, your thoughts quite as well. By allowing them to learn and to express themselves in their native language, they will have more confidence. When they are expressing themselves, they will have more confidence in their schoolwork. They will have more confidence in themselves. Because learning by osmosis clearly doesn't work. Placing students in English classroom and not giving them any instruction in their native language really just isn't as effective as some might hope that it is. It can work for like smaller students, like kids in elementary school perhaps, to sort of, I suppose, it's easier for younger students to sort of learn in that situation where they are immersed. But in a situation like where a student is in high school and they're going to be graduating soon, or for instance, like a middle school student, like the one I was dealing with, that's a bit higher level. That's a bit further along in their education. It's not quite as easy to learn a language simply by being immersed in it. Once you get older, small kids really are much better at learning a language, and I suppose it's just because it's not quite as their native language isn't quite as cemented in their brains as well. But for older high school level students, middle school level students, there just really isn't an effective method when they are about to enter the real world, so to say. Start working, start college, looking to graduate from their high school. It just isn't an effective method. When you're younger, you can take a little bit more time to sort of not understand it at first, and then after a while you can get a better grasp of the language, and end up more or less in the same achievement range as your native English speaking friends. But at higher levels, it can really just be damaging to a student's education. And even for younger students, it is better for them to receive a bilingual education where they are learning in both languages, so that they can increase language skills in both languages. That is better for their achievement, for their education, for their personal development, etc. And that is really what it's all about, is giving kids the skills that they need to succeed, so that all students have the same opportunity and same chance at achievement. We want to close that opportunity gap, that achievement gap. Because if you believe, like I do, if you believe in concepts like equality, if you believe that in America, we should welcome new Americans, and integrate them as well as possible, then being accommodating to someone who is here, in a new culture, in a new country that is not their own quite yet, it helps to be accommodating, especially in education. School should be somewhere where students feel safe, where they are in an environment where they can learn. If students don't feel like they can learn at school, then school is really not serving the purpose that it is supposed to serve. It is failing those students, and we should do our best to ensure that the education system is not failing those students just because of the situation that they are in. I sincerely hope that as more non-native English speakers come into the education system, as the issue sort of becomes more apparent, that we update. We don't stay the same, doing the same things that we've done. Because at this rate, bilingual education is something that's really needed in this country. I think that it's not insane to say that this country is going to just in general become more and more bilingual. I don't think that there will only be like certain neighborhoods where you will have to speak Spanish to get around. I think that it is good for English-speaking students to learn Spanish as well as it is for Spanish-speaking students to learn English. I think that bilingualism is just a generally good trait, and I think that we will see that bilingualism will become more and more important, and that need will become more apparent as time goes on, just as demographics in this country shift. And I sincerely hope that we invest in education and we can adjust accordingly. Because, quite frankly, as the demographics shift in this country, that's what we're going to need in order for this country to function. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. It's a bit more of a different style than what I'm used to, just because I'm in a new situation. I'm at college now. The teleprompter was not my own. The video editing software that I used was not my own. In fact, about the only thing that is my own is this camera that I'm recording on and the tripod that it's standing on. But regardless, I hope that you guys enjoyed. this video, and I'll see you next time.